Hello, and welcome to some Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And I am the guest star, Mark.
As per usual.
Frequent guest star.
And today we're going to talk about a grab bag, or a junk drawer, if you will, of different D&D topics. But before we do that, buddy,
it is 100% a junk drawer. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm pretty sure it's a grab bag.
Yeah,
I thought you said drunk drawer.
I was the one that came up with this concept, so it's a junk drawer.
You just because you said we should do a bunch of little topics in one episode doesn't mean you invented the fucking concept.
Yes, I did. For the sake of this cast, I invented the concept of junk drawer. So therefore, I'm naming it the junk drawer. You sound bad. Anyway, what we do on this podcast is talk about games. Like we said, we're going to do a bit of grab bag, a bit of a junk drawer, because, not every topic fills out an hour and a half. And sometimes we kind of get this, group of topics that are like, hey, this is 15 minutes. This is 30 minutes, maybe. This is 10 minutes tops. So we just want to knock a bunch of those out. For your listening pleasure today.
But before we get into that, let's talk about the campaigns that happened this week.
Oh right, yeah. What? Yeah. I guess Iron Gods is meeting on Saturday. So as an announcement, yeah, this is our big ending Iron God. We're basically just doing 3 boss battles in a row, apparently, reportedly, which seem like they might be pretty tough, I guess. And then next week we will have a special episode of some Derps Talk About Games where, we do kind of an Iron Gods post-mortem, where, we get as many of the people from the campaign as can make it on the cast, and we're going to kind of, I don't know, break it down, talk about it, think about it. It'll be great. But then what happened in Rune Lords this week?
Well, I'm a little biased, so I'll go ahead and let you guys give me your thoughts on it. Then I'll give you the behind the scenes, which is actually a really good way to segue into our first topic for tonight.
That is a good way to segue to the first topic.
All right, yeah. So just to give you guys a little bit of a ground floor of to what actually happened. So we were on a boat, and then right as the session opened, we got attacked by a bunch of ogrekin, and we dispatched them as adventurers are wont to do. Lost a crew member in the... how many crew members did we lose? 1 or 2?
2.
We lost 2 crew members in the process. And then, we were given the option to go seek vengeance. And the Wooden Wanderer, detecting tainted wood, was all for it. And everybody else also had their very sundry reasons. I point out the Wooden Wanderer because that was me.
Really? Did we have any other reasons? I went because you went.
Rufus was like my blades thirsty. But that's, kind of...
Rufus was just being chaotic evil? Great.
Yeah. I think Khan was like, I want to fight, as Khan does.
Fair enough.
Oh boy, here I go killing again.
Then we got blessed by the creepy priestess. And then...
the creepstess.
Yeah. Then we found the farm. We beat up some ogrekin, and then in one of my personal favorite moments, of course it's my personal favorite moment because my character did it, but we snuck into the second floor of the barn by wood shaping a staircase onto the outside and pulling apart the wood on the side of the barn. And then we got the drop on some goons, and we murdered them all.
Yeah, that was actually pretty clever.
In
1 round.
Did we really do it in 1 round?
You did it in a surprise round and 1 round of combat.
Oh, awesome.
Only one of them survived to actually take an action and was promptly killed by attacks of opportunity for moving. So...
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Good job.
He procced standstill, so then he was locked in place and couldn't leave.
Yeah, and so we burst into the back room of the barn, and there's a giant web filled with who knows what it might be. It could be a spider, or a spider.
Yeah, so clearly we're going
or
to...
a spider.
Clearly we're going to be fighting a...
it's a dragon.
A flesh golem.
It's just a dragon.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And there's some, at the very least, injured, if not dead, black arrows at the back of the
That is the interest. I suppose that's a cliffhanger for next time, but we're gonna find. I guess we're gonna find a little bit more information on what's been going on with them Blairos, as we like to call ourselves.
The Black Arrows are, in fact, related to Buddy's character Kenzo in quite some substantial ways.
That is my backstory. That I was, in fact, a Blairo. I'm gonna stop using that nickname. It's a shit nickname.
Yeah, that's pretty horrible.
I tried.
So behind the screen, it was basically, how can I get these guys on a boat, and how can I attack them on a boat? And then I did that. And then,
I actually really like that boat map. I thought that map was a great map.
It was a really good map. Yeah, it was. I really like that map. I'm probably gonna reuse it in the future.
It literally makes me want to. It makes me want to use it for Iron Gods. Like it makes me want to put like a boat section.
You mean in Hell's
Rebels?
Oh, Hell's Rebels, whatever. Yeah.
Rebels.
Because there's a couple of periods where like traveling happens or whatever, and I'm a big fan of like the caravan fight sequence. Where there's a caravan with a bunch of civilians on it, and they gotta get like ambushed on the road, kind of thing. I think there's a lot to love in that, but it's almost a little bit played out in my games because I do at least one in every campaign I've ever done in my life. So
not in Kingmaker.
No, we didn't do one in Kingmaker?
No, because it was like aborted in the second trimester before it became a beautiful baby.
Oh yeah, and you guys got that teleport thing, so it did. That was pretty good. Anyway,
oh yeah, I forgot about that. Anyway,
but I'm definitely a fan of those kinds of things too. Like I think my personal favorite one when I run in a bunch of my adventures is like a caravan on like a precipice, like on like a mountain trail. And then they get ambushed, and you have to fight the enemy off while riding the upturned caravans down the mountain.
That is basically like the most epic thing I've ever heard in my life.
That is, yeah. That's great. I'm totally not going to steal that. I'm going to steal it. So, behind the screen, it was actually a really interesting opportunity for me because I got to test out a lot of little minor mechanics against my players, including regeneration. So, how does the party deal with things that get back up after you knock them down instead of just taking them off the map? And that was kind of a good heads up for them. I used kind of a mini-boss mechanic in the sense of like whenever this particular ogrekin moved around and didn't get to attack something in a round, he got more and more angry. And then when he got hit, he got more and more angry, which led to some pretty devastating consequences because he only gets like one attack per round, but you want to make that have a lot of impact. So he did. And then I was also testing out another mechanic called damage thresholding, which actually takes its name from a D20 Modern mechanic. But in D20 Modern, the damage threshold mechanic is essentially when you take over a certain value of your hit points, you risk massive damage. And because in D20 Modern, it's less like, high fantasy, it's more or less there. If you get shot with a shotgun or chainsaw, you die instantly. So it's got a little bit of realism. But in the variant I was using, it's essentially reverse damage reduction, where instead of it being it takes off a certain number per hit, it just puts a hard cap on how much damage the target can take. So with damage threshold 15, if they take 16 points of damage, they only take 15. But if they get 3 hits that do 5 each, they still take 15, or 3 hits that do 10 each, they still take 30. So it's more or less cost insurance against some of the really big single hits that Pathfinder characters can pull off. Yeah. So what did you guys think about that? Because I know I wasn't obvious about that for various reasons. But
it's also one of those things where I wouldn't necessarily see it because I'm a 2-weapon fighting character. So,
you'd probably see it against like things you challenge.
That's true. I only that
you can get those really big, like 30 plus damage hits.
And he was at such low HP anyway that the stylish opening just one shot him in the first place. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think if I can remember where it like really triggered.
Yeah, what enemies did you actually put it on, Mark? Because I think
I just used it for the first two, the Crowfood and Plowmouth, which was the 2 ogrekin once you actually got to the farm. And it's more or less like that was just kind of the litmus test. It might show up later in this particular set piece, but it's going to be in use quite a bit more as you get into some of the actual ogres rather than the ogrekin.
Okay.
So, for those of you who are kind of new to Pathfinder, ogrekin are basically the inbred descendants of ogres and humans. And in most D20 games, there's like a half ogre, which is, kind of like an orc variant almost. But in Pathfinder, the ogres are very hills have eyes. So ogrekin are similarly very creepy and kind of flesh horror disturbing. So the idea behind the damage threshold on the ogrekin is just they're too, degenerate to feel pain. And that kind of trickles its way up to the ogres, which the party will be fighting a lot of very shortly.
Spoilers indeed.
Yeah, so... Yeah, spoilers, I guess, for you, buddy, and for our listeners. So the only thing I would say is that it wasn't particularly obvious, maybe, that was what was happening. And just kind of for the sake of player understanding, maybe explaining the mechanic and giving a hit, like the same way when something's taking DR, you'd be you feel like the impact of your blow was lessened or something along those lines, just to kind of keep players in. But otherwise, I think it's a good idea.
So the reason I wasn't really super transparent about that is because without knowledge of that, you can basically play it off as oh, this thing just has a lot of HP, when in reality they didn't. It was just the damage threshold was there, kind of thing. And mostly the reason I did that was because to the lay observer, it's this thing just has a lot of hit points rather than there's this gating mechanic. And to some players, I think that's going to be more fair, to the exception that the bruisers have a lot of hit points rather than the bruiser just takes less damage. And so it was more to kind of get my own kind of feel for it, and I think it was pulled off pretty well because it's designed to basically make a fight go longer. And in this case, I tried to put it on enemies without a lot of hit points just to see what it would do. Whereas later, the applications are more on things with a lot of hit points. So you have to kind of be clever with how you go around attacking them, sort of thing.
But I think in order to be I understand why you didn't for this particular session. But
in the future, it would be something to the effect of the RP, which is something we've kind of discussed, is more or less these things are too... So if you put it on someone who's very skilled, it would be that they're trained to kind of suppress the pain and keep fighting anyway. Whereas,
the RP that I was thinking of was because HP is an abstraction in the first place, and part of that abstraction is the ability to turn deadly blows into glancing ones, so to speak. And this is kind of an outgrowth of that, right? Someone who's really good at turning blows like that. Never takes more than 20, or whatever their DT is for the specific thing. My problem with DT has come down to kind of two individual bits about it systematically. Pathfinder as a system is built kind of unilaterally in the higher numbers equals better, right? Very few Pathfinder mechanics are built on you want as low as possible. Generally speaking, you want more of something in order to be good at it or whatever. And DT is basically the opposite of that, because a high DT means that you are letting more damage through, and a low DT means that more and more of these attacks are cutting off damage from kind of your threshold. And so that kind of bugs me from a systematic perspective. And the reason that is kind of incongruous is because it means it's really tough to bake DT kind of organically into the rest of the system, right? It's harder for me to derive DT from other mechanics in the system because other mechanics tend towards quantity, more of a thing to be better of a thing, right? But if I key this to somebody's con modifier, for instance, it that as they get more and more con, right, and more hit points, their DT gets worse and worse and worse, which is kind of a problem. Unless you do weird formulaic things, have it be a negative associated with other numbers, and you kind of get into like awkward territory that's not intuitive. I don't know. That's the big problem. I like it from a design perspective because I do think that it does add another little neat lever, for a DM to pull. But I don't like it from the systematic perspective for those two reasons.
Yeah. So why don't we workshop it a little bit, right? Like we were discussing this a little bit earlier. And an idea that I had was to have it kind of mirror, if the listeners at home are familiar with StarCraft 2, there's a unit called the Immortals, which they have a shield that effectively works like DT, but when the shield runs out, it stops providing that damage reduction benefit. And so what I was thinking, something along the lines that would kind of solve the issues that Buddy has, is something like an armor plating system. Flavor it however you want, but each plate of armor absorbs one full hit and then falls off. Maybe it regenerates at some rate or not, but that's a more fine-tuning thing. And so a lot of little hits will knock off all the plates, then you can actually start hitting the HP of the enemy. Whereas big attacks will be absorbed by the plate entirely and fall off, and because there are a lot of fewer large attacks, they will fall off slower. And I thought that might be a good compromise. What do you think of that, Mark?
I'm just an afterthought.
I think, like, as a...
If you get around to it, I guess.
We've discussed... we discussed this earlier, and I got some of your points, and I kind of incorporated that into my pitch here.
I think the benefit with that is I think that's a great system kind of on its own merit, but I don't like it just because, like, the idea with damage threshold is that it kind of shifts the paradigm to be more rewarding for certain characters, and ultimately it doesn't stop your character. It doesn't make your character ineffectual. And that's sort of the same thing I was going with my DR variant, where it was like, the way I do DR is basically any damage reduction that the character takes is converted to non-lethal instead of it just being ignored entirely. So, like, you can put a lot of damage reduction on something that's like, a werewolf or whatever without it feeling impossible to characters or trivial to someone with the right type of penetration. And with DT, the idea is, like, I did get the criticism where, like, the derivation is kind of obtuse and it's the one thing that you want to be lower, whereas everything is great in quality. And I get that. I think that's a legitimate criticism. But the thing is with, like, an armor plating system is when it ignores, like, X attacks entirely, it kind of relegates someone in the party to being like, okay, well, you hit less, so you're going to be the one who goes up and kind of makes those blows soak. And on a boss, that might be fine, but in, like, a broader encounter, that's less kind of rewarding, I think. And especially if it's, like, regenerating thing. Like, something like a Force Shield where it's, like, temporary hit points or whatever, that kind of makes sense. Like, I get that. But the whole point with damage threshold is, like, it's a way to mitigate incoming damage without it negating it entirely. And I think having people pick and choose, like, who's going to, like, basically
I think that's great because that's
not so good.
Right, but that's a part of D&D,
at least on the superficial
level.
I
choose to use my will saving throw spells against this guy because he has good fort and reflex, right? Like, you make choices like that, and sometimes those choices happen on a party level, right? Sometimes this is a fight where the two-weapon fighting guy is going to, you as a party need to set him up to make as many full attacks as possible, because that's the best way to get past this, the damage threshold problem. Whereas the opposite is case with high DR fights, where it's like, okay, well, we need to make sure that our brawler has a charge line for his pummeling charge, because that's the way that we're going to get the most efficient, the most efficient damage on this kind of hypothetical dragon or whatever it is. And that, that's a big part of D&D, and that's something that I think comes out in both of these variants, whether or not you have armor, whether or not you have DT. The thing that I like about DT in comparison to this is that it's more black and white. I like that with DT as a system, a multi-hit user, a two-weapon fighting user is 100% effective, right? But a Vital Strike user is much, much less effective. And so it consistently is targeting, it's consistently letting one, kind of player through the gate. And impeding the other character in a very kind of clear way. The same way that DR does this for two-weapon fighting characters, to be honest. And I think the armor system bleeds that line a little bit. It makes it less... It's obviously more effective for the two-weapon fighting character to break off all of these armor pieces, hit all of these mirror images, so to speak. But it's still it's still as effective for. It still blocks their attacks. It still negates the two-weapon fighting damage. So even though two-weapon fighting is more effective, it's not as entirely effective, kind of in the same way, if that makes sense, which I think is a legit virtue of, DT.
Sure, I think that's, yeah. So basically my entire takeaway is I think your players should feel like they're doing something, whereas like if it's just a zero sum, like either you break a mirror image or you don't, that doesn't feel rewarding. And actually that might be a good topic for the next little mini discussion, is mirror image as a spell, just because it's so kind of relevant, at least in D20 games. But anyway, what do you think, Mango, to kind of round this out?
No, yeah, I think that's a fair point. I understand your concerns. There's something I also kind of wanted to bring up on this topic. It's kind of just like the root of the mechanic is that I think part of the reason why this mechanic doesn't exist already, in a lot of ways, is because I think that Pathfinder as a system kind of lends itself to more attacks. Like you have to really kind of specialize to get big one-hit attacks. Like you have to take a couple of feat chains, not chain feats, but whereas if you just kind of go the standard route, you're gonna get your iteratives at some point. And I think it's on the whole easier to get multiple attacks. And I don't think that invalidates the design. I just think that that's a big part of why this doesn't exist already, and maybe is worth considering as to why.
Even
why
then,
these kind of encounters
I think it's still good because I like the idea of encouraging. I think that there's the great sword fighter who specializes kind of in like those Vital Strike superpower shots. This is a mechanic that incentivizes him to think about full attacking. You know what I mean? And even just from that like kind of little perspective, I think that that's kind of valuable. I like the idea that it's something that makes your wizard think I should use Magic Missile or Scorching Ray rather than Shocking Grasp, because they get multiple missiles from those first two, rather than just extra damage dice from the second one. And I think those little interactions are good ones. They're strategic. They're making, they're strategic. They're tactical. They're making the characters and the party, think about encounters more than just enter room, pummeling strike until defeated. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Do thing. Yeah.
See, I understand your point, but I actually don't think that's as true in reality. Like, your first example is the Vital Strike Greatsword Warrior. The Vital Strike Greatsword Warrior is making a full attack if he can. Vital Strike is rarely beneficial other than piercing DR if you're able to make a full attack. And the other side of that coin is that a Vital Strike Greatsword Warrior can make a full attack, but the dual weapon fighting stabby rogue can't make a Vital Strike when he needs to overcome DR. Which I think kind of like tips the balance. Like this problem is more tactically solvable by somebody who's building for one big hit than DR is solvable by somebody who's
right. But that's a problem with DR more than a problem with DT. Which that seems kind of like seems like a criticism of DR.
I mean, but the system. Those are the assumptions that the system is built around, and so like in a campaign where like we expect DT, and we expect about even numbers of DR and DT, it's always better to build the Vital Strike Warrior. Whereas in a system that expects only DR, both builds kind of work because not a lot of things typically have DR, and they're not like.
I mean, I literally built Kolbjorn the way I built Kolbjorn because we were fighting in Iron Gods where everything has hardness, and it just means that there's a ton of, it just means that there's a ton of DR running around. And so in order for Kolbjorn to be maximum effectiveness, I took Pummeling Style.
Right, but that's my point, right? Like a one big hit character does not need to sacrifice anything to go back to...
I think he sacrifices the opportunity
to deal
cost,
with
though.
DT.
I think first of all, I think one big hit characters exist, right? Some of them, obviously full attacks are...
Sure, definitely.
Well, the thing about one big hit characters is I feel that they are kind of not controversially, kind of like counterintuitively more mobile, because they're more built around their standard actions than they are around full attack actions. And so a 2-weapon fighting character is using lots of 5-foot steps to stay in range to keep hitting his full attacks, whereas the Vital Strike character has more kind of more wherewithal to move in and around, in and around a fight. Commonly, I think that this character archetype is also combined with medium and heavy armor that restrict movement speed, and this is kind of like offshooting some of that to a certain extent. But yeah, I don't know. I think one big hit characters definitely exist, and they're suffering the opportunity cost of, Vital Strike is. When they, Vital Strike and Power Attack and Furious Focus and all of those things are really good on one big strike characters, but in a DT setting, they might say, you know what, I'm going to turn off my power attack. It's not, it's just sapping my attack for for damage that's just going to get wiped by DT anyway, and I'm going to sit here and power attack rather than use, these feats that, you know what I mean? Like that's his tactical decision. I do agree that, yeah, it sucks that a brawler can't.
Yeah, but that's my point, right?
A 2-weapon fighting ranger can't do the same thing in order to get one big strike, but
But that's kind of my point, right? Like a one big hit kind of character becomes a more generalist character in a DT setting because, or rather, he has the like I said, he has the option to switch off. Like, he's never not effective. He has the option to switch off one big hit and take iteratives on a DT or on a DT character, which is something that in kind of the design space that DR falls into, which is kind of limiting what a rapid attack character can do.
Yeah, I definitely get that point. I'm just saying that's a criticism of DR, and that's something that is not.
It's not a criticism of DR. I'm saying that DT isn't accomplishing what it wants to accomplish.
Because he's being less effective. He's willing.
No, it's
the
not.
opportunity cost of I am not using my build optimally is the less effective. He's less effective in regards to himself, not in regards to here's rogue.
I see what you're saying, but the issue is it's accomplishing what you want it to accomplish, not what DR accomplishes, which is what this is supposed to be, like a counter, a counterpart to. Like DR, assuming that like what DR accomplishes is it forces rapid attack characters to think inventively and do something else, whereas a DT doesn't actually do that. It just forces somebody to go back to iteratives, which is not the same kind of like innovation that DR forces. I just don't think that this DT system like forces those decisions aren't as meaningful as the decisions that need to be made with DR. Because
I don't know, Mark, how do you
there's
feel about this
very simple
line of
answer
thinking?
to the question.
So, I actually kind of think that I lean more along the side of Buddy, where I think it is a kind of an emergent gameplay thing where you have to kind of think tactically around it, whereas that option might just not exist for a DR situation. Because like with damage threshold, you can still choose to do your one big hit. It's just going to be less effective. Whereas like with DR and you're a 2-weapon fighter, there's not really a lot of things you can do to pool your attacks together, except like maybe make less.
By the way,
of
I
them,
will
but
point
then that
out
sucks.
that
I think the
answer, by the way, in this sense for DR characters is to focus other places in the party, right? You're in a party, you're in an ecosystem of other characters, and you don't personally have to be effective against every enemy type. So maybe avoiding the golem and fighting the mooks is the better use of your time, for instance.
Of course,
right? But that's exactly my point, right? You force a multiple attack character to do something creative, to make those types of decisions, whereas the decision path for a one big hit fighter against a DD character, he doesn't have to make that sacrifice. He has to say, well, I'm not going to do any damage. I'll knock over a column. He might, but he can mitigate his cost like much more effectively by switching to a full attack, right? Like he can be 50% effective,
right? But would you rather be 50% effective switching to a full attack, or 100% effective by going and fighting the proper enemy who you can do your one big hit on, right? That it's the same principle, right? You don't remove that ability for the one big hit character.
Right, but you don't force it like the DR does, right? It's not
this
as much of an option.
This is why I think it's a criticism of DR, because I almost think that DR, I think that 2-weapon fighters should have effective means for in order to counter this kind of DR thing. That's what this criticism sounds like to me.
So that's your criticism.
No,
I'm
saying that the principle you're outlining is actually a principle but criticizing DR.
No, it's not, because I think DR does its job well, and I think that's a good thing. You think it's a bad thing. It's not a criticism of DR. It's criticism of DT, because I don't think DT does the thing that I think is good, which is severely limit the options of a player in a certain situation.
I think we spent enough time arguing this topic.
So I think let's talk about mirror image.
I have nothing to say about mirror image. I think it's a fine spell. Does it offend you?
Yeah, I really don't.
Well, I think it's too strong.
You know what? I'm gonna look up. I need to look up the text because I just haven't thought about it in this kind of context.
I just think in the terms of like the way it stops damage is way too efficient, because essentially it's multiple. It's a continual version of displacement or blur. And it's the same level as Blur. So you can take Blur, get 20% mischance on all your hits, or at the same level you can get like a 70 or 80% mischance for that, decreases down to 0 over time, but it at worst is 50%. And then if you play it raw, where if you do hit the target, you don't break an image, then it's basically just better than Blur. Blur might last a little longer, as like a minute per level instead of a round.
The problem I have with Mirror Image, just looking at it, I cannot believe this is a second level spell. I thought it was third level, which made a lot of sense in my mind. This and Fireball feel like competitive spell levels, but the fact that it's and haste, exactly. You know what I mean? Well, but the fact that this is a second spell level, it seems like a must take, right? Like, what else? What other second level?
It's a no-brainer. Yeah, it's a no-brainer. If you have access,
it's just
if
like
you have
one
access to Arcane Illusion spells, you take Mirror Image.
In a build, that's well, yeah. Even Blur though.
Blur.
Like, you pretty accurately point. Blur doesn't scale is the problem with Blur. It really quickly kind of falls off in terms of uselessness. I don't know, man. What do you think?
So it scales. So, but Blur, the way that Blur scales is that it's always on, whereas, kind of in the same way with DT is that as player attacks go up, mirror images fall off faster. So mirror images need to increase as you increase in level in order to keep up with iterative attacks to make it about as effective. I'm not saying there's not a judgment on as to the effectiveness of mirror images being OP or not, but that's how Blur competes at that level. It's a constant 20% mischance, whereas mirror image is a it's 1d4 per 3 caster levels. So when you take it, that's 1d4.
You get
1d4 plus 1 per 3 caster levels.
So you have a over 3. So basically, I think it takes like something 4 hits for Blur to be like better, kind of. Like if you take 5 hits, you're dodging at least 1. Whereas with Mirror Image, you have a 66% mischance, then a 33%, or you have a 66% mischance, then you have a 50% mischance, and then when you finally lose that image, you've effectively dodged at least 2 hits for it. Whereas
that's all front loaded though. Like if it's all loaded into kind of like the first 3 hits you take give you a 50%, like, you know, give you that decrease.
Sure. I mean, I'm just saying, like, on a superficial level, that for Blur to kind of break even, it needs to last a really, really long time, and you need to be getting attacked a lot. Whereas, like, the one full attack that Mirror Image helps you dodge, especially because
that is the
only thing it needs to do.
You know, you shouldn't be in melee, generally speaking. I don't know. That seems strong just because spell level to me, but. I don't have a fix in mind.
We have other topics
I don't play enough. I don't play enough Magic characters to have a good sense of the ecosystem of spells offhand. Oh boy, my favorite.
Let's talk about the Dreadnought.
Yeah,
Buddy, why don't you go ahead and
the Dreadnought.
off?
So here's the thing. I love Cavaliers. And this is something I kind of was thinking about, you know, as we were just talking about this grab bag and the fact that we could get, I got to talk about the Dreadnought. I was just like, man, I love Cavaliers, but I hate the mount class feature because I think the mount is, I just don't like mounted combat in general, to be honest. I think it's super, super specific, kind of in the sense of like, you know, like mounted combat makes sense in Giant Slayer, but I don't think it makes sense in, I don't know, you know, Iron Gods, right? Like, you know, these hyper dungeon crawly APs don't seem to like mount. So I created an archetype. I actually created 3 archetypes, but this is the only one that like made it past the finish line. For a class called the Dreadnought. And the Dreadnought is basically built around making your charges more, not necessarily like effective. I really did my very best to avoid some class features that the Cavalier has baseline are you do double, triple damage on these charges or whatever. And I really wanted to avoid that because I kind of thought, A, it's lazy, and B, I don't want the Dreadnought to just be a hardcore damage source where he's making his charge with whatever item, with whatever weapon, and it's going to be putting out like 60 damage in a turn. I kind of wanted it to be a little bit more thought-provoking, I guess, and tactical a class. So he has a couple of abilities. The first is Brutal Charge, which he gets at level 1, that allows him to charge through difficult terrain, allied squares, and broken objects, which are objects at less than a half HP. And if an object blocks the Dreadnought's path, he can still attempt the charge. He just has to break the object as part of that charge maneuver, which... I'll explain the full class first, but I love that ability. Then at level 3, he gets Juggernaut, which says that the first time when he challenges an enemy, right, with the Cavalier's challenge, the first charging attack made against that enemy automatically threatens a critical hit if it hits. At level 4, he gets the Blitz ability, which basically, instead of ending a charge with just a regular basic attack, he can end that charge with any attack action, any standard action, attack action, granted, not by, like, class features. So he couldn't use, like, he couldn't do cheesy stuff like with Precise Strike from Swashbucklers or something weird like that. So he could Vital Strike at the end of a charge, for instance. At 11th level, he gets Crushing Charge, which is Mango's least favorite ability. It allows him to ping-pong kind of across enemies as a special type of full attack, where he charges the first enemy and then makes his first iterative attack. If it hits, he can then immediately go charge a second enemy that he has not already charged before and make his second iterative attack as part of that that full attack action, and the level 20 ability, which is ridiculous and doesn't, it's just a level 20 ability. It combines his ability to use Crushing Charge with his ability to use Blitz. So instead of doing it as part of a full attack, you could just charge however many enemies and just Vital Strike each one, because level 20 abilities are broken. And so anyway, that is the Dreadnought class in a nutshell. What do you guys think?
Well, let's take it one ability by one ability. Let's start at the top.
I think Brutal Charge is really good. I like it. I think it's exactly what the class kind of needs.
I don't think there's anything I like more about this class.
It's cool.
I like this class a lot. This is one of those classes I designed like for me to a certain extent. Like I would play the fuck out of a Dreadnought in a heartbeat. I love the if an object blocks your path, you can just bust through it like the judge. You know what I mean? Like that is the core fantasy kind of almost flavor that like you're sitting across the table from somebody, right? And you're like, fuck this is so you charge through the table and like rend the table in half. That just feels great. That feels so cool to me. Plus the ability to charge through walls and stuff.
And I think I kind of agree with that. I would actually, honestly, I'd probably go as far as saying you can add your Cavalier level to the charge, attempts.
I'd say that it should scale. Like it's a lot at level 1, and not that I think it's bad. I think it's pretty good. I think that you could add some scaling to it in the kind of like you could charge through a number of squares that are difficult terrain, or a number of squares that are occupied by allies equal to your Cavalier level, or something like that. The kind of just, a level 1 character charging to a line of allies is kind of seems a little bit off for a level 1 character. But I definitely think that you should add something to the class at some point that increases his ability to break through things, to make those checks easier, because it's those break DCs are not.
I actually do agree with Mark. I think
trivial.
Adding your Cavalier level to those break DCs is a great way to. It's a great way to do it. Yeah. Really
kind of flavor that. I will say that I really don't like Juggernaut, especially because this is even the toned down version. I think threatening a critical hit.
It's not. Hold on.
It's
not whenever
really
you charge.
Substantial, especially. Well, no, especially when you stack it with Blitz.
It's the charge. Yeah, it is.
When you charge the target.
It is
challenge.
Key to the per day of challenge in order to make that. In order to balance that back. I also think, having played the Student of the Street Samurai, right? Like the opportunities to charge the target of your challenge are not as intuitive. Honestly, in a certain sense, I designed this before we played too much of Rise of the Rune Lords, but it is harder to do that than I expected.
If I were going to change it though, what I would probably do is make it so you automatically confirm your critical hits against the target of your challenge rather than threaten. Because even if it's a per use limited kind of function, like I get it, right? Like I understand what you're trying to do with that. It's still just, it superficially looks really,
how often are you going to threaten,
really strong.
How often are you going to naturally threaten the target of your charge? In order to make that confirm worthwhile.
Well,
it seems like
the
a
thing
really
is,
low
like, it's not so much that
proc chance. That is a valid criticism, I think, that it being a third level ability.
That's true. But it's more the fact that with Blitz, like, you can do some really crazy combinations of stuff. And, I don't know, it just seems like, just to me, it feels kind of off. Like, I'd have to see some numbers on it, but I think it's kind of suspect. Like, I'm not saying it's wrong or it's bad. I just think that it's something that kind of makes my GM
really what
radar
I'm trying
go off.
to do with this ability and why I like this ability a lot is I like giving auto threatens because it changes the crit game. I feel like the crit game in most like vanilla Pathfinder is a lot of stacking crit chance. And so, you get a keen rapier and call it a day kind of a thing. And I like the idea of, I like a Juggernaut who specifically uses a ×3 Great Axe or ×4 Scythe in order to maximize on his Juggernaut crit damage, right? I don't think anybody takes a Scythe in Pathfinder. I think a Scythe is just baseline a bad weapon to take because that ×4 crit is great and everything, but how often do you proc it? Not often enough, and you can't even increase that kind of dependably. And so this is what I really like. This is what I treasure about the auto threaten. Also, auto threatens, if it hits, still means you have to hit 2 attack rolls in a row, which isn't that happens. I think once you get into higher levels, it'll get it does
it's
get into trivial land,
okay,
so to speak. But I think that is that's another piece of it. That's another piece of it that makes it okay to me as such a low level ability, because how often it's very easy for a level 3 Cavalier who only has one challenge per day to completely whiff this just because he doesn't have the attack roll to make it work, so to speak.
I mean, if you're playing this class, you take, I guess improved critical with what it was, not improved critical. What's the one that lets you confirm easier? I couldn't
tell you offhand. I know some weapons confirm easier, but that's kind of about it.
There's a few that gives you plus 4
critical focus.
Critical focus. We could, and let's see what level that is. Oh, okay, there's a base attack bonus requisite of +9 for that. So I guess that's not as much of an issue as I had thought. It just still feels really strong to me, with the order of the Order of the Flame. Like, he gets at level 8, he gets intimidates on critical hits. I'm just trying to look for kind of analogous things because it's just screaming.
Yeah, I mean,
really too powerful to me.
this is. I kind of feel like there are ways to break this. If Paizo published this, Pathfinder Society would go nuts, right? Because, people out there, hardcore power games out there would definitely figure out a way to really take advantage of it. I'm sure.
I've actually, you've actually brought me around over the course of this conversation, where I think it's, especially even with the synergy with Blitz, which was kind of my concern, I think it's okay, especially if it's only against the target of your challenge, so you're only getting it a couple times per day, and to kind of abuse that it's prohibitive. So I think it's actually probably fine.
I don't know. Challenges don't give that much power generally, though.
In what?
Well, the differences between comparing it to Cavalier's Charge, which just makes charging in general a lot better.
To put that in
really
perspective,
kind of,
because it's Cavalier's Charge. Cavalier's Charge is the one that makes it.
Yeah, is okay.
You get an extra +2 to the attack roll. Yeah, this is the stuff I was trying to avoid. You get the extra +2 to attack roll. You get your charge attacks automatically deal double damage, automatically deal triple damage. That's the stuff that's actually in baseline Cavalier that I don't like about it as much, right? I think those are kind of almost lazy in their design, and it's a place where the Dreadnought, a raw Dreadnought charging versus a raw Cavalier charging, the raw Cavalier probably out damages him on a on a dummy, right? Just because those ×3s, those extra the boost to the attack rolls are things that are going to overshadow Juggernaut. Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know. I'm not convinced. I'm just gonna say that I think that threatening a crit force. I think there's a reason that Pathfinder shies away from forcing threatening critical hits, and I'm not convinced that to give it to somebody at level 3 is a great thing. But I've kind of exhausted my arguments. So
well, then there's obviously Blitz. I like Blitz a lot in the context of I like its use with combat maneuvers, and I think that's a pretty neat way I don't know. It almost feels necessary to a certain extent to have an ability like Blitz on this version of the Cavalier because, he has. I feel like he has to be a little bit trickier than just damage all the time, almost.
I think what I would have liked to have seen Blitz be as kind of a functionality thing is let you do stuff with swift actions on your charge. So like you get your charge attack, and then as a swift action, you can follow it up with kind of one. Oh,
that's actually kind of interesting.
Like and that's really strong. But I think.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
Just in the sense of like, if you charge a target, you can use a swift action to also trip them or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Like I don't think I don't think
there's any restriction on using trip on a charge. Is there?
By raw, a charge is just a basic attack.
Are you sure?
You can do an overrun and a bull rush. I think, yeah.
Or a bull rush, but those are clear exceptions because it's not an attack action. Charge replaces your attack, and then pounce is its own special action.
Yeah, that was something I was very.
You make a full attack.
I thought about it. I was like, I should just give them pounce and call it a day, but it's like, no, don't be lazy. Which is a nice segue into
don't do that.
Crushing Charge because one more thing I want to say about Blitz because this is always important to me, and this is a personal pet peeve of mine as a hardcore martial player in Pathfinder. I think medium and heavy armor are too punishing to move speed, and so just like I added this, I talked about this when we did the Warlord. I'm going to bring it up here. The Dreadnought's ability to charge, ignoring movement speed penalty from medium and heavy armor is important to me because I think those penalties are too high as is. Do you guys have any thoughts, feelings? Well, so in the sense of...
sorry, can you repeat that? Just so I'm not sure I quite understood.
There aren't enough ways to mitigate... Basically, the only way to mitigate the movement speed penalty is with armor training from the fighter, or kind of weird haphazard things in the sense of like getting on my mount so I don't have to worry about having.
I see.
Yeah, and so I wanted to add something to boost that.
Yeah, no, I get that.
I like guys in full plate. I think guys in full plate is a good fantasy, and it's something that I want to keep going.
I think the wording on Blitz, you might want to I think if you change it to be you replace your in as a full round action, you can move up to double your speed and then take an attack action at the end. You get a +2 bonus on this charge, on this ability kind of thing. Then it's it's not a charge, so you can still take that attack action, and then you can do kind of some stuff with a swift action or whatever. But I think kind of making it that it's charge, but it's not, is kind of a safer way of kind of, at least as far as a third party approach goes, because then it doesn't run into a lot of problems with people being like, oh well, it's charge. It's if it's obviously charge but not, then I think it's kind of safer, almost.
Yeah, I don't really know. I don't have a ton of feelings on that. Anyway, Crushing Charge. Charge.
So, Crushing Charge is interesting.
I actually kind of, if there's anything I would change, I think it would be the Crushing Charge. Crushing Charge to me could change to something else. I think there should be a good way for the Dreadnought to take a full attack action, a good, interesting full attack action that isn't Pounce. I don't want to give him Pounce. I think Pounce is kind of lazy, and I think it's broken. I don't know. I was trying to figure out a neat way to work around that almost. Maybe I'm the only one. I don't know. Who knows?
I think it's cool. I think it's interesting because it's not Pounce, but it still lets you do a full attack action and just charge a shit ton of people. I think it's cool. I think it's fine.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I'm a little bit wary of like the ability to kind of like turn on a dime with it. Ideally, I think like
I'm actually not, because I like the mental image of some dude running around with like his scythe or whatever, just like
That's
shoulder checking kids and then changing direction.
It is
like,
meant to be a very
Gundam shit, like, and that's super cool.
It is a pretty weeb. It is a pretty weeb ability in that way, you know. Like it's just like the what is that ability like Omni?
But it's so good.
I don't know.
It's so
I've seen
cool.
the image macro where like kind of like you're like Master Chief's Alpha Strike. From League of Legends, you know what I mean? Like that's almost the fantasy that it's trying to fulfill. Which you know, I will admit is a little out of place when you consider the Juggernaut as like super hulking, you know, strength focused guys in full plate. But
yeah, I was gonna say I would almost prefer it to act like what's it called, like a ride by attack kind of deal, right? Like if you can draw a line on the map. And if ever anything is within reach of that line, you can make an attack against it.
Interesting. Well, that to me, it doesn't proc. It doesn't proc well enough because those lines are really hard to draw.
Yes, but then you encourage your Juggernaut to use a reach.
Well, you know the Juggernaut. The other thing about the Juggernaut is we are very swiftly going to see whether or not this is super broken because Enoch
also,
is playing one of Else Rebels.
Yeah. Was Enoch.
I would like to make a whip Juggernaut that
a
can
spiked
just
chain monkey. Yeah, like a monkey.
Dude, I just like to charge through dudes, like to like.
I like to charge through dudes and whip them. I don't understand.
Though with the reach weapon, it does create another cool mental image of you just like hooking onto kids and just like spinning around to go charge someone else. Just like that's so cool. It's so fucking cool.
Cool. Yeah, I'm with you. And then what was the last one? Oh, Crushing Blitz. Yeah, Crushing Blitz is really broken.
I think Crushing. I even for a level 20, I think Crushing Blitz is
that's totally true. That is 100%
yeah, I think
true.
Actually, you know,
because
whatever.
I'm pretty sure that when you combine it with Vital Strike, you just keep. You just keep hitting. You just hit the whole room. I think the answer to this, by the way, will be, you know, for each successive attack, you lose, you know, 5 on your next attack. Make it like the full attack action. So even though I'm doing Vital Strike on each one, my to hit is not, you know, pants on head retarded.
I think it's okay. Although, like, I wonder how does Crushing Charge interact with 2 open fighting? Do you get more charge attempts? If so, how can I use this? Like, is it because I think because technically they're not iterative attacks.
Yeah, they wouldn't qualify as...
If you wanted to make a 2 open fighting Cavalier...
Yeah, they wouldn't qualify as iterative attacks, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's...
I mean, that's fine to me, because I definitely designed it with the one big hit in mind, rather than... I don't think this is a 2... You know... Yeah, I don't think... Oh, man, that's interesting. 2-weapon fighting. Whew, interesting. Yeah. I really like the Dreadnought. I honestly want to debut. I should go back to these because when I was designing the Dreadnought, I also kind of made two other classes. But a big part of my design process is a lot of the times I'll take what I want to get rid of, right, and I'll say, okay, so now all of a sudden there's a slot at level 1, 3, 4, 11, and 20, and then I'll just brainstorm a ton of mechanics, and there are two different kinds. There's the Praetor, which in my mind, which is a terrible name, by the way, which in my mind is like a hardcore duelist. It's someone whose challenge is really, really effective, but, kind of at the exclusion of these other stuff. So the strengths of the challenge are accentuated, the weaknesses are also accentuated, kind of thing. But that never really got off the ground because I couldn't really come up with enough mechanics to fill out the full slot well. And the challenge was just really too broken. And the other one was the Sentinel, which was like a tank archetype, which was built around stuff like, I made so many mechanics and they're all so cool. I should just make that its own base class at this point. Stuff like being able to roll fortitude saves against incoming damage to reduce the damage. Being able to grant the brace ability to adjacent allies for just like weird stuff like that. Man, I really love these classes. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to ramble on this podcast where I ramble constantly.
No, that's cool.
No, I think a couple of things. One, I think I think the Dreadnought needs, I don't know how, maybe
it needs a safety valve of something.
No, maybe this replaces tactician or something, but I think it needs like overrun and charge through as
you can take those as bonus feats.
Yeah,
you can take those.
The Cavalier
as bonus
gets
feats.
the bonus feat,
like as part of Cavalier 12, innately.
I think those things are obviously natural to the build, but I don't really know.
So
that
I think
want to hardcore include them, just because. Yeah, and
I don't
it's
think
just
they're
power budget,
explicitly necessary.
You know.
Yeah. So, let's
Yeah, we get.
Is it cool if we move on a little bit?
Sure.
Or do you guys want to talk
just one last thing that I wanted to bring up.
Okay.
Because I'm right. Is you get a melee attack at the end of your charge, which means you can do a trip, a sunder, or a disarm on the end of the charge, as a normal
attack. It does feel dirty. I did not realize.
That feels dirty though.
Fair enough.
But I guess like you can.
Yeah. Yes, you're wrong.
Although you can just slide tackle someone, which is great.
Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, I don't think it's like a terrible image. I just wanted to bring it up because there are things. So, as someone who reads a lot of these source books and reads a lot of forum posts about these source books, whenever somebody says something that you assume worked already, everybody goes like, "Wait, does that mean that doesn't work then?" And that's just the kind of confusion that I always like to...
Oh, like the one thing with, like, reach or whatever, where it's like you can ready an action to attack someone or something.
Yeah. Like
yeah, that one was... That's silly.
Yeah. But it causes confusion, and not that, And just for completeness' sake, I would say you should get rid... Dirty Trick you might have to get rid of... or I don't remember how Dirty Trick works, but, like, there's... It's never mind. You get my point. I think the next thing we wanted to move up, talk about was save or suck. And for me, it's kind of like I want to talk about: is there a good way to do save or suck with players that doesn't make them feel terrible when they fail it? 'Cause it seems like an interest.
No. I don't think so.
Like just not at all. You don't think there's any good way to do it? It seems like it's a tool in a lot of toolboxes that can't be used just because it means
players,
like,
yeah. Well,
I think the simplest thing to do is I think the simplest thing to do is just like allow repeated saves, and just that feels better to me. At least like in combat, it's like one of those things where it's like, when does an encounter begin? When does an encounter end? When are you in or out of combat? Like, I think that's something that's really ill-defined in the Pathfinder rule set, but for the sake of, like, saves, like, I think it's different if you, like, try and hold person someone than, like, throw them over a bridge and walk away, versus, like, if you just try and hold person someone and try and kill them, or if you just try and hold person someone and just sort of let them sit there while you go do other stuff. I think a lot of it's, like,
the other
kind of cinematic license, but
sure.
I think if you're in a stressful situation...
I'm mostly talking about in the context of like a standard combat, right? Like
then I think a save every round is probably fine, and then like something that we were talking about like quite a while ago was the concept of like a rally action where you can go over to your buddy and kind of be like, "Yo."
See, I like the rally action more
to like shake him out. Like that's.
I think there's a big problem with the save every round because a lot of these spells and stuff are balanced with that in mind, or without that in mind, right? Like a lot of like high level spells that are like hardcore crowd control, you could hypothetically just save out of. Like a PC just saves out of it, which really kind of devalues that spell slot for like encounter designed for the bad guys.
Funnily enough,
I know. I'm speaking.
Raw allows a save every round, but something. Yeah, but something like what was like maybe it's like Stinking Cloud or something that like really
right or like even I'm thinking
cuts
stuff
your
like
action economy,
Flesh to Stone. Like really, how does that work? Do you? I don't know. Do you pop back into reality, even though you're supposedly petrified in perpetuity. Like that those are the interactions that bug me. And I don't know.
How do you guys feel? Like, something I've always toyed with is like giving the players something else to do during that combat. And maybe this becomes too much of a tell when like the NPCs suddenly appear. But like maybe if you anticipate that potentially happening and have like an NPC around for that player to control, or something
like. Do you
like
mean
that.
In the sense of like, so you offer multiple targets for the PC?
No,
to
in the sense of like.
on, or...
Oh no, I meant more like
Kenzo gets
your
Flesh to
character
Stone,
gets Flesh
and
to
I
Stone.
take over Fang.
And while that
start
sucks,
playing as Fang until Kenzo gets.
Oh, okay. I mean, like I think that's fine if it's organic, but
yeah,
that kind of sucks. Like, because you always have to. Like I think that's okay. Like once in a while, it's kind of neat, but at the same time, you're basically making a character play something else they didn't build for themselves, and if they did build it for themselves, then it's kind of like, how often are you screwing your players like that?
Sure.
And I think I don't know. It just because the thing is like D&D, it's not like an MMO, and I think and when you get together with your friends, like it can take a long time, and if you're not doing anything, that's when you go play WoW, and that's it's not a great feeling. Like
sure, but yeah, I think the point of like maybe have like you get to control the NPC character is so that like the once in a while when this happens, right? I'm not suggesting that every combat you freeze somebody's character and be like, you got to play with the toy now. It's
right.
Is more like when that like making that option a feasible thing to happen every once in a while. Because right now, as it stands, if I don't have like I've with my Rune Lords game, I am famously, maybe not so famously, your listeners, running it completely raw. And one of our characters got stunned for like 4 rounds, and I kind of let that ride. And that person was just bored the whole time, and I felt kind of bad. And I wanted to figure out a way that I can kind of use those tools, because I think they're good tools for even dramatic purposes, and not have it be so infuriating for a player.
Yeah, but see, part of me is just like, you know what? Tough shit, player. This is like that's just part of the game. And the player that tunes out because of this is being a bad player more than I'm being a bad GM, right? Obviously, it's a really tough thing to parse, because on one side you obviously do kind of want to be accommodating. I definitely understand that. I've definitely done plenty of this happened a lot in Mark's game, where I frequently went really hard really early in the tournament, and I would generally knock some guy out and then immediately afterwards get knocked out myself, right? And for the next hour and a half of that tournament, I was just kind of in the stands doing nothing. Like I've definitely been there. I definitely feel that, but I also feel like it's wrong for a player to kind of use that as an excuse to tune out.
Well, that's also partially encounter design. Like, if it's a lot of like single target doing stuff, it's like I think this is more of a question of less like save or suck and more in the sense of engagement. And
yeah, that's fair.
I think there's a lot of like media difficulties. Like, we play online a lot, so there's a lot less face-to-face interaction. I think even like I wouldn't want to do this, but you could turn on like the little like display thing to see people's faces, and that might kind of increase the human-to-human interaction. But I don't know.
I have this problem at a table in real life.
Yeah, I mean, I also think kind of from the opposite perspective. This is why I like the rally action a lot. I think from the opposite perspective, there are ways in the system to circumvent this stuff. You have potions, you have allies who are going to cast spells on you, that kind of stuff. And so, to me, a rally action seems fair because it's sinking the action economy into this. And this is me as Kenzo saying, you know what, I could full attack this guy right now, but it's really important that I get Rufus out of his funk. And I think that feels great. It fosters interaction. It bonds the party together, so it's not just 5 individuals all trying to be the best versions of themselves in a vacuum. This is what I love about the rally action, and I think that's the better version of it compared to, getting some kind of free, some other kind of free save mechanic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the rally action's a pretty... I don't know, like, I'm kind of, like, sucking my own dick here, but I think it's pretty elegant, and it's simple, and it's not something you have to do. You can just say, yeah, fuck it, whatever, I don't care.
The thing I kind of worry about there is generating animosity between players due to whoever's perceived notion that you should have picked me up instead of doing the thing that you did. I mean, I guess at some point you have to trust your players to not be
first of
shitheads.
all,
I mean, that's one of those things you just can't.
And second of all, I actually think this is controversial, and maybe this is also a good little mini topic. There was that part in Rune Lords before we had our podcast and we're doing kind of whatever, where the next plot hook was made. And I specifically had Kenzo, almost walk away from it, right? Because, he was having kind of a crisis of conscience. It wasn't necessarily in character.
Oh, my God.
I think of that as being a positive thing in the sense of, yeah, I think that's allowed to happen for a character, and I think that fosters, kind of the connection between two people, right? Kenzo and Ereve are friends, right? They're not just two people adventuring. Kenzo and Rufus are two people adventuring together. Kenzo and Ereve are friends, and that's a big difference to me. And I think that mechanics that accentuate that, right? And players, utilizing the mechanics that accentuate that, and taking the opportunity in the game to accentuate that. These are all good things that should definitely be, facilitated. It happened in Iron Gods too. Kolbjorn and Felox went and got drunk together. That was a 5-second thing that happened off screen, but and maybe this is just me because I'm a theater kid at heart, but I've always remembered that, and I can't get mad, Felox shot me once by accident. I don't get, hey man, whatever. I'm not gonna get bent out of shape about that, right? You were mind controlled.
Wait, it was by accident?
So quote unquote by accident. Yeah, you almost
right.
killed me.
Yeah, I almost killed you, actually.
I think that stuff is important, right? This is the stuff that I love about D&D. This is what I think I want, D&D to be, and I feel there's a big danger in the system, kind of as is, where those bonds aren't made, and you just kind of have 5 people running around. There's no, why are they working together, right? That question is just kind of politely never brought up, and that sucks,
Sure, but I don't think that necessarily solves the save or suck problem, right? Just not to be a curmudgeon and be back on topic, but there are also legitimate reasons, for characters to not like each other and still be working together.
Right, but so I think that's what I'm saying. I think animosity is good. I think characters not liking each other and then overcoming that to bind themselves, stronger. Right, that is inherently a good thing, and that's something that comes from something that comes out of animosity.
So here's
comes from other sides.
I understand that, but I think that in-character animosity is fine. What I'm concerned about with this is out-of-character animosity, because, somebody's somebody's pissed, why didn't you pick me up? I didn't get to do anything all fight because no one could be bothered to pick me up, and now I'm mad as a person. And again, at some point you have to trust your players.
First of all, that's a legitimate shithead thing to do. God, I know players that we play with on a regular basis who would say that to me. But it's just, I gotta roll my eyes. I don't know.
Yeah,
I would never do that.
Yeah. I don't know.
And even if I would, like,
sure,
even if I had like a lapse in judgment, or where I kind of lost perspective on this thing, and that's something that can certainly happen, especially if you phrase it wrong. We were talking about this, for the listeners, Manga came down and hung out with me this weekend, so we talked a lot about stuff like this. We were talking about how, like how parties interact in kind of like negative senses like this, right? It's a big difference when Felox accidentally shoots me because he's mind controlled and then apologizes to me afterwards. And we've shared a drink and we're friends and we've been on this thing. And it's another thing for like in the first adventure, to have your paladin go into melee, and then the war priest uses burning hands, and when the paladin gets mad about it, he's like tough titty. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you know what? That's even okay if that's all in character.
Right. That's what I mean.
When it's out
right?
of character, it's a problem.
I definitely see situations where someone could say, "Well, it's not my problem. You chose to get in melee with the fucking enemies, so I'm gonna burning hands you." Or whatever, like that kind of thing. I don't know. It's it is tough.
Yeah. Just as a point, if the person that the story's about is listening to this, I know it's a little bit more nuanced than that. So don't worry about it.
Hey man, it's a podcast. You're being a jerk.
Yeah.
Hey, that was hostile. I feel so persecuted.
But just kind of like to kind of just bring it back to the Saber suck problem is
I've been here 3 times already.
No. I mean, I think it's important because like a lot of it is player attitude, and I had a player say to me, a combat where I'm not doing anything for 5 rounds is terrible game design, and he was very, very irate about it. And at some level, I can understand where he's coming from, but at some like. At that point, it then becomes my job to convince him that it's not terrible, which is, I think, a harder problem to solve.
This just reeks of me of people misunderstanding D&D. It's not Skyrim. It is not one person. It's a team game, right? You took. I would say you took a hit so that someone else in your party did it, right?
I don't know.
And it's up to your party to make up for that. It's up to your party to, it's like when the same thing happens when a player goes down in a fight, right? It's up to your party to bring you back up, right? And and those things are there, which is why I think the rally action is pretty good.
Actually, speaking about players going down, if you guys want to talk about a 4th topic, I actually have something really interesting I'd like to discuss.
Intrigued. I'm curious. Hit me with your best shot.
Yeah, go for it.
So, I have a. All right, Joan Jett, the Heartbreakers, calm down. So, I have in my hands a copy of a 3.0 supplement called Ghostwalk. And what Ghostwalk is it's like a campaign option where when a player dies, they immediately respawn as a ghost. So, and instead of ghosts being like, spooky negative energy things, they're basically outsiders. And if you die as a ghost, you're fucked. But I think that's a really interesting compromise because when you die, you basically immediately come back into the game with a new suite of abilities. And I find that
interestingly,
really
I actually think there's
like
a
when you're a
full podcast in this because I think we've talked about this before, but there's a lot to be said about Resurrection. Just to address it, because I don't want to cut anybody off, and I do think that this is worth the time that we're getting into it. I think that is neat. And
tune in next week.
Is
I think I want to design a full system around that because you've got
already
a ghost
full system, but yeah.
You've a system that also gives you options there, right? You've got your ghosts, you've got your spirit medium for from the
like our favorite, yeah.
Yeah, I mean because that works for that concept too. I'm imagining being a spooky skeleton, which I think would be fucking amazing. Being like a skeleton's character. Like just I think there's like a whole lot.
Did someone make a skeleton race?
We talked about it as part of our other.
We talked about it.
Have we teased this on the cast? I think we've teased Risseron on the cast.
Risseron.
So we'll do some Risseron episodes. But yeah, we talked about a dedicated undead race like the Forsaken, and I think the place we ended at was a race of skeletons rather than straight up
spooky skeleton.
We did scrap the race before.
Yeah, there were a couple of, like, I remember even independent of Rizarun, there were a couple of there were a couple of discussions we had about if around Halloween, what if you wanted to play a spooky, scary skeleton? And there's some third party stuff, and then there's some options with the race builder that could get you.
Yeah, I
close.
think the big thing. I'm actually a big champion of not the undead race, and I was a big champion of not the undead race at the time. Because I really hate that undead don't have a con score. I think that's just dumb. It's just so dumb. So hypothetically speaking, I would want to do a more intensive I would do a more intensive redesign around that concept in general, in order to make a race like that happen, so to speak. I don't know. I like the ghost mechanic, especially because I think resurrection is good in the context of I think it's a big. This is one of the things I like about D&D's kind of reactive storytelling, right? Like it's a major hassle that can come up in the middle of a campaign where the guy dies halfway through the dungeon. And now all of a sudden you have to figure out a way to get him, back in the fight. So I like this idea where you turn into a ghost almost as a stopgap, right? You're not just carting around the dude's dead body and he's completely useless, right? He turns into a ghost. He's 75% as effective as he would otherwise be. And eventually, after however long, you figure out some way to get him back into his actual body and we're good to go. Which is what I like a lot about it. That's why I think that's a neat system.
Yeah, no, I think that like I said, I think there's a whole cast on this about like what resurrection campaign
just to be
allows
pedantic.
for,
I said that.
Kind of
Thank you.
Whatever.
Anyway,
I said it too.
We've both said.
No, I've said it, so I also said it.
Yeah, I definitely think there is a full resurrection cast that I do want to go into. You know what I actually also kind of like about this ghost idea? I like the idea that like I get to almost, or not get to, but like I abandon. I'm playing Cavalier, but I'm a ghost. I'm incorporeal. I can't do anything, right? But I get a new set of kind of light ghost mechanics that I can go possess a bad guy.
Well, no, you do.
Ectoplasm. I think
no,
cool.
actually, yeah. No, that is actually how it works. Like, once you die, you trade some of your, like, mortal levels, so Cavalier levels, for levels in Ghost, and that gives you ghost powers, and then when you return to life, you lose your ghost powers and become better at whatever you were doing before.
That is pretty
It's called the Life Epiphany.
Though it does sound,
there's like 300 feats.
It sounds a little bit intensive for kind of what I'm thinking. In the sense, I don't want somebody to rebuild. I want to just say, hey, listen, apply this template, right? The bullet points are you're incorporeal and you can't cast spells or make attack actions, but here's 3 or 4 things that you can do, that are.
Yeah, I feel like I want to build out like a GM playbook for like these types of situations.
Yeah,
it's like, okay, so I flip the page. Guy goes down in the dungeon. Okay, I'll flip to this option, and like, oh, the resurrection spell you cast was cursed, and he's actually a skeleton. Use this stat block now, and maybe eventually you have the player return to normal, or if the player enjoys it, he can keep playing the skeleton, and that kind of thing. I think would be a fun thing to have. But I think before we close out, I think this last topic can be handled relatively quickly. I think it makes sense in terms of like bringing players back with different characteristics. Is something that we discussed recently in one of our chats. Is building a player with significant disability, or building a character with significant disability such as like blindness. How do you guys feel about that now? My just kind of like laying the ground.
Yeah, I think I was the one person who didn't chime in on this conversation, so you guys will kind of place your arguments first. I think that makes sense.
I think there's stuff in the system to a certain extent that mitigates this, but the ideal scenario is some homebrew to get around it because we were talking about it specifically in the context of a blinded character, and I think that the blind status effect is really rough. And the reason it's really rough is because that status effect is designed for, I'm a brawler, I can see naturally, and I've seen naturally my whole life, so when I'm blinded, that's a huge thing. And that, if I'm Leeson the blind monk, and I've been blind since birth, or I've been blind for years, I've learned to compensate for it, and that compensation isn't something that's in the rules by Raw right now, and so there's there's a significant kind of subset of homebrewing that could go into that. I actually think the best way to do it would be a campaign trait, like a hardcore,
like there's in Skull and Shackles there's a peg leg
trait.
Yeah,
exactly.
That lets
you have a peg leg, no drawbacks. It's like you're blind, but functionally, your hearing is so good that you can see, or you got scent somehow as part. That kind of stuff. I think is really cool and really neat.
Yeah, I think there's some balancing around it, and my point about it in the discussion was essentially that if you're going to run it by Raw, and you've got the fantasy of the blind monk is, or the blind seer actually works because there are mechanics for that, but those kinds of things by Raw is something that you have to at least warn your players about and warn them what's going to happen. And for a new player, I would encourage them not to do it, just because in my personal opinion, getting a player to play the game fairly raw their first time around, and while letting them be powerful in that scenario is kind of optimal.
I don't think it's ineffective though. Like I think the group of us could figure out a way. I mean, the other thing is like it's kind of a moot point anyway, because I think all of us agree that it would have to be, whether or not you could do it by Raw doesn't matter, because all of us agree that we should homebrew it, and we would take the time to homebrew it. Is really kind of where it comes down at the end of the day.
Sure. Mark, did you have a deeper thought? Because I know you've been kind of holding back.
Yeah, I think the thing is if there's... I think playing characters for the RP shouldn't incur mechanical benefits or mechanical drawbacks. If you're playing a blind character, you should basically just say that they're, functionally identical. If you want to actually have some mechanics to go with that, it should kind of be, detrimental and advantageous in different ways. Like, so, okay, if you're playing
net zero, but
net zero. So if you're a blind character, let's say it should never be something you take for mechanical purposes. It's just something that if you want to RP it out within the mechanics, you should be able to do that. Like, if you're a blind character, you're not going to be playing an archer. If you're playing a blind archer, then you just have no actual, there's no penalty and there's no advantage. But if you're playing a character who doesn't want to get hit by gaze attacks or, whatever, you have to take a drawback with it.
I think that there shouldn't be an instance where someone opts into the blind for mechanical benefits. But I think that they should be mechanically unique. I don't really know how to. I
don't agree. I just think it's easier.
I feel like that's got to be a thing where
let's say there was a trait. Let's say there was a trait that said
someone has
you don't suffer from the blindness condition. Here's a couple of things that apply to you, and you also get blind sense 10. Right? I could totally see a power gamer, say, oh, I'm gonna take this because I get this benefit, blind sense 10, with none of the drawbacks, because I'm basically, I can see just fine, and that sucks, right? But I think that there's a way that you can make it with there's a way that you can make it with trade-offs, not necessarily net zero. Though actually, well, okay, so yes, net zero. Sorry, I don't think they should be mechanically identical, right? But I do think that there's a way to add some advantages to being blind and add some disadvantages to being blind, such that you're no more or less effective than the not blind member of the party. And some of that is gonna go and say, listen,
I agree with
playing
that.
a blind monk is fine. If you want to be Thousand Eyes, if you want to be Lee Sin, that's cool. You could do that. But yeah, playing a blind archer would suck.
Oh my god, dude,
Yeah.
Thousand Eyes was the coolest.
I'm glad you got that reference. I feel like Marco Polo.
Although-
I love that show. Show's great.
Dude, of the references,
but
come on. So, although I do like the idea of a blind archer, just because
I like the idea of,
I don't know. There's something really like,
so I like
play
the
a Zen
I like the
archer.
idea
That
of
would
the
be
blind archer,
legit.
kind of like the Samurai Jack episode. You guys know the one I'm talking about with the 3 blind archers? Yeah. That would be
Yeah,
sweet.
the one with the 3 blind archers. Yeah,
work, right? Like in the sense of it wouldn't necessarily be an archer, but like you could have a ranged character like that work that uses tremor sense, right? Like that's cool. If somebody wants to play Toph, the D&D character as a kineticist or whatever.
yeah.
That would be so
neat.
neat. Oh, could you imagine a bat race who are all who are all blind but see through echolocation?
Blind.
Now I want to go build a bat race.
Well, dude, can we have
in another game of mine that was
they're
a
just
little
more
horrific, nautically themed, there was a race of shark people called the name was terrible, so don't hold this against me, Carnanids. And they were like street sharks. I
not even like
share
Pterodons or something. Oh my god!
I have a pretty like spotty track record with names. There was an ant people in one of my games that were called the Kolkari, which I always thought was a great name, and I've wanted to kind of use that again. Who are kind of like Formians, but better and different. Anyway.
Yeah, I think just to kind of bring it home, part of the key to these kinds of these trade-offs is that it's probably best not to like lay them out on the table ahead of time, not to be like, and if you choose to be blind, you get this and don't get that. It's you kind of wait, and if a player comes to you and
that's a little bit like my ridiculously controversial
Yeah.
mole campaign trait from Hell's Rebels. Which is built around, it's you have to commit to it in order to understand what the benefits and the drawbacks of it are. And I couldn't just, I couldn't explain it. I couldn't explain it to you on the cast because obviously that would kind of be that would be defeating its own purpose kind of thing. But I think that's the way that I would hypothetically handle it. Is you put it in there and you say, you know what, you can be blind. Speak to me if you want to commit to a blind character kind of thing.
Or I would say like a step before that even is like, don't even say you can be blind. Like if a player comes to you and says, I've got this neat idea, but I'm concerned,
that's
I kind of want to
true.
do is be
but
like,
I'm saying,
I think something like the mole trait makes sense to have on the table.
Campaign traits, or in certain campaigns that makes if we're in a hyper wuxia campaign, it makes sense to me to say, you know what, I'm futzing around with these campaign traits as is. I'm going to make a blind trait. So if somebody wants to play that kind of thing. To be honest, I've actually kind of come around to this idea that I almost want to not have baseline campaign traits that players can choose from to a certain extent. What I almost ideally like to do is meet with a player one-on-one for like a big almost session of kind of brainstorming and getting a sense for that character, and then crafting a campaign trait for it. Almost, this is something that I kind of did in Hell's Rebels to a certain extent, and I don't know, I really like that experience, and I think that's good to a certain extent.
I think that's neat, but I think the other side of that coin, which maybe you're not considering, is that for me at least, looking at the campaign traits kind of gives you the spark of the character that I want to create.
Instead of listing out all the campaign traits and saying, this is what a noble is, and this is the mechanical benefit, this is what an exile is, this is the mechanical benefit, you list them out as backgrounds, right? As kind of prompts, right? And then I come to you and I say, hey, listen, I want to play the bastard noble son of whatever, and then you and I talk about it, and I assign you a campaign trait, based on that. So Really, I'm sorry. I'm not attacking campaign traits in general. I'm attacking the mechanics aspect to it. I almost don't like that players, if I want to play a noble, but I'm a martial character, right? It makes more sense for me to go one trait than the other mechanically, and that tension is bad to me.
That's fair. I think that, like, I don't know. I think that's fair, but I also think that, like, sometimes having those options there for you kind of informs what you want to do as a player. Like, maybe you wouldn't consider doing this but for seeing this trait that you think is neat and wanting to do it from a mechanical perspective. I think there's obviously a balance. I think that actually the way that you handle it in Hell's Rebels is pretty good. Where, like, you've got some set out, but you also said, and if you want to work with me,
I did end up working with Jimmy specifically. Not that he really came to me like that. Jimmy and I were just kind of talking about we were actually just talking about his portrait of all things and how much I really like his portrait because it's, like this kind of like Daniel Boone mountain man, which is just so great. You just know exactly what was kind of there. And I was just like, hey, listen, this is a thing that I didn't mention because I didn't think it was relevant. I didn't think it was, irrelevant from a campaign trait standpoint. I didn't think anybody, but it would really make sense for your character if you knew about this organization in kind of the region. And he ate that up. And we worked through it. And this is kind of the thing that's making me think about it. Like that was a cool experience. I also like a lot of those traits, like from the noble houses. I think all of those traits are great because I like it gives me a very solid RP. I can nail that down. Oof. I know.
Yeah, I think we've got some stuff to discuss about this off air. Just because I've got some things to be up to. But anyway, we are over time.
Well, guys, thanks for having me along. I really appreciate the chance to talk.
I'm glad that you were just happened to be in Mumble at the time that we were recording. Yeah.
Right? It's not like we usually play Iron Gods at this point.
Yeah.
No, nothing. Yeah.
Stupid accountants.
God, accountants.
I'll leave that as kind of a mystery
CPA.
as to why we're cursing accountants. So until next time, we're doing Iron Gods this Saturday for a long session to finish out the campaign. We will be doing Rune Lords on the Monday, I assume.
Yeah, Monday is Rune Lords. You guys are going to be doing some hillbilly ogre things.
The next cast will be hopefully a retrospective on Iron Gods, with as many of those people as we can get together. And then
I should start I'm pretty sure we'll be in what's the second weekend in February. February 9th is looking like it's going to be the opening. February 10th.
Wednesday, right?
Yeah, February 10th is the opening. Rebels. Tentatively.
Yeah, we already had the soft opening, the grand opening.
You can follow me on Twitter at @BuddySola. If anybody wants to do that, I tweet about the podcast sometimes.
You can follow me at the One True Mango. I retweet his tweets about the podcast.
You can follow me.
What about we can follow your BattleNet tag? I think that's the only social media. I guess you can friend me on Facebook. Don't do that. No, do that. It's fine. I don't know how I feel about that. That's weird.
Friend Buddy on Facebook.
I don't even use my real name on Facebook.
Send him all of the pictures.
Why don't we should
there is a Facebook group, but I actually need to change it.
There is a Facebook group.
I want to. We need to make
I'm
a
not
Facebook
even in it.
page that anybody can just join, which I haven't done.
Yes.
But, we'll
yes.
get there.
Well, we'll have links to that at some point. I do put a link to the Facebook group in the description. We should probably have both for maximum keks. Until next time, dear listeners.
Goodbye.